Hi, my name is Leah Day, and welcome to this video for the Building Blocks Quilt Along. Today we're learning another cool design in our Cheater Drunkards Path block. So let me show you what it looks like and some tips before we get started. So here's our quilting guide, and we're basically going to be putting a large spiral and these repeated rows of echoes into our block. If you're looking for this quilt guide so that you can mark your block, you can find it in the Building Blocks quilt pattern available at leahday.com. Okay, so the cool thing about this is that we've kind of got some practice built in. These lines of echo quilting back and forth are really nice practice because we're basically going to be repeating that when we get out here. And the hardest part of this block by far will be working into the spiral. It kind of starts here and working all the way into the center. Now, the one thing about this is once we get to the center, how do you get back out again? So I'm going to probably leave this part to the very, very last and wait on it until it's at the very end, and then I'll knock it out. So let's get started. Okay, so I've already knocked out my echoes over here, and I'm going to start working on them over here too. And I'm going to take a wide angle today so that way you can see my hand placement, how I'm moving the block around as I work through these areas. Right now I'm just travel stitching right on top of that piecing line. Remember, these blocks were not pieced in the traditional way. We did not set in seams. We cheated. We cheated by stitching on the surface and then clipping away the fabric. And that's not only going to leave a raw edge on the surface of the quilt, it also left that top stitching line from our piecing, so that's what I was travel stitching over the surface of. And this is very secure. You know, we've got basically 2 lines of stitching now holding that in place. We're also going to have multiple lines over this area as we quilt our big spiral in the center of the block. So please don't be worried about, you know, security of things coming apart. A lot of people make ragged edge quilts. Now you might have just seen my thread right here kind of pull out, and if I open it up you might be able to see this. It's kind of, well, you can't see it from that angle, but basically it's kind of just wrinkling up a little bit. I can tell that direction my machine doesn't like it, and if I continue in it my machine will probably break thread because the thread was twisting kind of weird. That's the best description I can give it. It was just the angle I was stitching was just causing the thread to kind of twist up a little bit and be a little kinky right there around the needle. So this time I'm going to rotate rather than trying to stitch in that backwards upper direction. And what I was saying about rag quilts, you know, raw edges, it's more of an aesthetic thing than anything else. You know, how we piece the block is definitely secure, nothing's going to come apart. But I know that some quilters simply do not prefer raw edges on their quilts. And remember, in the first quilting design that we learned, we actually learned free motion zigzag. So if you're wanting to go back and find a way of kind of sealing up all of those raw edges, definitely check out that technique. So you can see how I'm just swinging back and forth, pulling out and down as I stitch those curves, and they're just repeated lines of echo quilting. And I didn't move my hands very much as I was knocking out these smaller ones, as these smaller rings. So I'm going to travel stitch on down and start knocking out basically the exact same shape, but it's ever so slightly bigger down here in the spiral area. And one thing I want to do before I get myself in trouble is I want to go and look at the spiral and use my finger to trace it. Where does the spiral start? Where I know I don't want to knock that out quite yet. So it starts right here, so I'm going to just mark that with a big circle so I know not to hit that line. I also could potentially connect with it right here, so I'm going to mark both of those. I'm going to be careful not to stitch on those until the very end. So now I'm doing that same move again with my fingers. I'm kind of gently pulling and pressing down in order to get control over this corner. Carefully travel stitching back. Even though we left that 1-inch border on the blocks, we actually pieced them and added them to every block, that extra 1 inch all around, you know, you can still find that those edges are a little bit of a struggle to maintain control. So it's good to know exactly how I'm holding on to it and gripping it in a way that maintains a good amount of control and stability as you're working through that area. Okay, at this point these arches are just a little bit bigger and a little bit kind of less of a curve, more shallow, I guess I could say. So I'm just going to try and stitch through these, see how far apart my hands are as I guide this under the needle. If you feel like things are out of control or you're stitching off the line really badly, just stop and rotate. And remember our trick from the last video about starting and stopping. You know, slowly starting with your hands, slowly starting with your foot pedal, increasing that speed until you come to a nice medium speed. You gotta just get control over the foot pedal more than anything else. Because these lines are so long, I am stopping and rotating pretty much with every pass. And this is, you know, just kind of one of those nice things that the quilt block, working in small blocks, affords us. It allows us to work like this. Okay, well, I'm just going to continue to knock out these echoes, and I will speed up the camera so you can see me work through the entire area. Maybe I'll zoom in the camera a little bit too, and that way you can see me knock out the whole block. Okay, so I'm ready to knock out the spiral, and just in case you don't like this idea, in case you don't like the idea of having to leave this to the end or all the travel stitching, like I ended up way over here in this corner and then had to travel stitch my way back into the middle, you might not like that. You can just break thread. You can go on ahead and knock this area out, get to the middle, break thread there, or you could broken thread in the corner. It's entirely up to you. I get a little bit nitpicky, and this is just simply the path that I chose to take. You can also find ways of stitching back out of it. You could get to the center and travel stitch your way back out along that spiral. You could also get to the center and stitch right through the middle and just create basically a denser, more compact center area. That would look cool too. It's really no right or wrong way of doing it. This is just the way I chose. So now I'm going to knock out the center. I'm smoothly working my way into it. Probably going to leave my hands in this position. With spirals, the way I stitch them at least, I kind of like to just go on ahead and knock it all out in one pass rather than a lot of stopping and starting. Even if that makes me stop, stitch off the line a little bit like I just did, that's okay. I just like the smooth look. Just working my way all the way inside to the middle without having to stop and start. Sometimes if I stop and shift, it doesn't feel as comfortable and I end up stitching it worse than what I would have if I had just left it alone. So this is the way I've knocked it out. I know that Josh will probably rotate a lot more than I did for that, but understand, no right or wrong way of doing it, and if you're worried about stitching off the line, just remember, these lines will erase. So that's it for stitching spirals and echoes in our Cheater Drunkards path. This was our last design for this block, and I hope that it has felt fairly easy and quick. It's one of those designs where the two are kind of interrelated. For echoes, these are repeated lines of quilting, kind of set a set distance apart, and they're really similar to spirals in the sense that those rings just continue to go out and out and out with the spiral. So I hope that you can kind of see how these relate to one another and start using them in your quilts. I love both of these designs, but sometimes, especially those curves, those big, wide curves, can feel a little bit of a struggle to get a smooth movement through it. So don't hesitate to stop and rotate if you need to. So my name is Leah Day, and this has been a video for the Building Blocks Quilt Along. Pick up your copy of the Building Blocks quilt pattern and piece and quilt along with us as we learn 42 beautiful quilt blocks. You can find your quilt pattern at leahday.com. So until next time, let's go quilt.